No, come on up, everybody. We are going to get into a developer panel, and I'm pretty excited about it because I get to sit on stage and ask questions to people that are a lot smarter than me. So hopefully this goes over well from my perspective. You've got some great professionals up here. I'm excited to kick this off. So I'd like to do a quick introduction of all the folks that we'll be chatting with this afternoon for a short bit. You've seen most everybody through some of the discussions we've already had in the last 2 days. Can you squeeze me in there?
You can lay across.
All right. So that's pretty awesome.
Okay.
We could probably use another couch. We'll probably squeeze over. No, that'll be kind of awkward having a split that way. But, maybe 2 and 2? How about 2 and 2? Can 2 of you squeeze over?
Let's go there.
Should we drag the couches over?
Musical chairs here is good. Okay. Brent Shepard, Prosperous. He's the lead developer of WooCommerce subscriptions, which is one of the largest and most popular WooCommerce extensions. Becca Rice. From Skyverge, you also manage sellwithwp.com, where you write and edit articles on creating e-commerce, business, and powered by WordPress.
Absolutely.
Awesome. David, who just spoke, founder of Pragmatic. Great to see you again. Awesome discussion. Gold Woo expert, and you've worked with folks like Microsoft and Bacardi, to name a couple brands. Claudio Sanchez, and you are being coined as the beloved WooCommerce core developer from Brazil. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to cover a couple different areas. One, really looking at releasing a plugin for WooCommerce, which I think is a neat thing to kind of discuss, and from an entry-level perspective, exciting to hear from folks that have done it, experienced it, and scaled it. I think another important piece of that is stepping back into WooCommerce core and how that all comes into play and the development side of the house there. And then developing with WooCommerce in general. So when coming up into a space where you have an idea, concept, and you're looking to create something because you think that there's an opportunity there, how do you look at validating that idea? How do you look at seeing if it's something that's really going to make sense? And Becca, if I could get your take on that.
Absolutely. So we've built a lot of different WooCommerce extensions, and you want to make sure that you're building something that people need. Writing at Sell with WP, I get a lot of people that will pitch plugin ideas, or they'll ask, hey, is this something that you think would work? And all the information that you would need to determine if this idea is a good one is out there. And for, at least I know from mine and Brent's perspectives, since we do already have existing plugins, we get a lot of pre-sales questions and emails like that and support threads where we kind of have a benefit of knowing what people are asking for. And if you don't have that resource, it's really helpful to look at blogs or forums. Comment sections of blogs are a great place to look at the kind of questions that people are asking and seeing if they're experiencing these pain points that you think that your plugin is going to address. And then seeing if that problem is solved at all, first of all, and how it's solved, to see if your plugin or your planned plugin can do that in a better way. And so anytime that you're looking at a new idea, you want to make sure that your audience already exists. Not that you're going to have to maybe build an audience and convince them that your plugin is going to be useful. You want it to be as easy of a sell as possible. I know that, Brent, you guys have built a few extensions recently as well. What process did you guys go through with that?
So we're kind of cheating, I guess, because we already have a pretty big user base and people are asking us for more things. And we're just starting to like over a few years, you'll hear people asking for the same things over and over again, and then you sort of say, okay, we've got to build something for this. So if you already have an established audience, I guess it's almost similar with Sell with WP. Mm-hmm. You guys have an audience, and then you will get a pretty good sense of what people are asking for there. But also, I guess there's sort of, in validating an idea, there's known problems, which is definitely what you want to go after. And they're the problems people know they have, and they're looking for solutions. And then there's probably problems that people don't recognize so much yet. And you might see that as a problem, but people might not realize that it's a problem that could be solved yet. And that's a whole different category. I would probably try to avoid those things if you can, but I think the only way to sort of validate an idea in one of those categories is to try and build something and then get it in front of people to see if they go, oh my God, this changed my life, or if they're kind of like, why would I use this still? Because then maybe it's not actually a problem, you just think it's their problem.
And that sounds like the initial build to me. Is that the same take that you kind of process when adding new features? What are some of the phases or the stages of adding new features into a plugin?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons we're actually starting to use more of these mini extensions, which I started talking about yesterday, is because we have a really high bar for new features to go into subscriptions now because things roll out to a larger user base. Whereas with mini extensions, we can ship things a little bit quicker, we can get feedback a lot quicker from just the few people who are really asking for it. And then that also gives us a way to gauge demand. One of the great things about WooCommerce extensions is that there's ideas.woothemes.com. And that's brilliant for just a very direct way of gauging demand and feedback for certain things. People just go and vote on an idea, whether it's around an extension or some problem they have that isn't being solved by an extension or anything else yet. And even in there, it's changing these days, but a few years ago you could just jump straight in there and you would find ideas which might have a few hundred votes and there was nothing that was possible to do with it, or nothing that could solve that problem yet.
So now you've gauged demand, you've validated that concept, that idea. You start to develop it and you put that into play, however your life cycle works in terms of developing. When do you know that it's ready for release or beta testing? How does that work?
Well, I'm kind of the beta testing specialist, I guess. So when we go through a process with that at SkyVerge, we have a lot of updates in progress at any given time. And the first thing we've done is we've put together a spec as to what this plugin or what the new feature is going to look like, what that should look like to the user, what it looks like from an architectural standpoint. And then the first thing that has to happen is that has to pass user testing. So at least 2 people on our team will go through, make sure that first of all, every feature works as advertised. There can't be any major hiccups. Like if something is supposed to print documents, it needs to print documents. If something is supposed to restrict content, the content better be restricted. So we go through and make sure that the first thing is an alpha phase that passes user testing. From there, there's always feedback, right? Software has bugs. So we'll go through, we'll fix these things, we'll polish them up. And if you have access to other people that can test your plugin, that is super valuable. So we sometimes have merchants that we can work with that will do that. If you don't have that, anyone that's familiar with WordPress can test your plugin, because anytime someone tests your plugin, aside from yourself, they are going to do things that you do not expect.
Sure.
They're always going to do things that you didn't anticipate, and it's really valuable to see that and be able to incorporate changes that are going to accommodate that, and to make sure that the UI gives the user the suggested steps that they should be taking to use the plugin. So user testing is super important when you think that something's going to be ready. Once you've done that, and you've polished it up, you've fixed any obvious bugs, and you've ensured that your users can figure out what to do with this, you also want to make sure then that they have resources around that you've either had it documented with like tooltips or something within the plugin, or that you have a knowledge base available so that people that want to go past basic usage or to get further information can do that.
So in terms of feedback, what is the best mechanism to get feedback when you go outside, let's say, into the WordPress ecosystem on that product or the features that you're adding?
That's a great question. So since we have a larger team, we are very fortunate to be able to first get feedback from each other, which is super valuable, especially when you need to kind of rubber duck something and you're stuck and you want to make sure that you're going through the process of saying, hey, are we doing this the best way?
Sure. Not
just, is this going to work? Are we doing it in a way that makes sense to everyone that's going to be using this? And then outside of that, a great way to get feedback if you don't have that and you don't have people that are able to beta test is to make a free version. And when we were very small and we were just starting out with our co-founders, one thing they did is they would build a light version of the plugin and put it on WordPress.org, because you're definitely going to get feedback from free people, from free plugin users. They're going to tell you what they like and don't like, and sometimes we'll be very intentional about that, which is great, and you should welcome that, because they're going to help you discover pain points, the things that your plugin could address, especially because what you think may be important to people is not always what's actually important to people running their businesses. So having freemium software is a great way to get some user feedback on what features are important to add and which ones that you may have thought important or not.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, I think if you're building something where you already know there's a need, you will hopefully know who, like, people will give you feedback. Like, it's easier to get feedback than it is to, like, not get feedback in some ways. Like you say, if you release a plugin to WordPress.org, you'll get feedback for sure. I think sometimes one of the harder problems, like when you say which mechanism, is how to manage that feedback, because some people will hit you up on Twitter, some people will send you emails, some people will actually use the support system you've got, some people will find your personal email that was published on something 6 years ago, other people will use your work email, that whatever. So you probably just want to look at trying to get something to help centralize that, particularly early on. If there's one or two of you working on it, it might grow into something where you have a team working on it later on. It can be really good to actually have something where you can share the load on that feedback, I'd say. So find tools that allow you to sort of pull all those different channels together, because people will use all those channels.
It's like that form on the site that is for like pre-sales. It says, do not enter any support questions here, and that's like, you know,
that's where the support questions everywhere. Sure. They'll come from everywhere you can imagine. Yeah.
I'd like to switch gears a bit, and Claudia, I'd love to hear from you on this. It's what does the future of the REST API look like?
Well, right now we change our current API, and like dropping some stuff we built for myself, and taking the WordPress API. That is a way for all the plugins now, so we are changing to that. No one to be scared of right now. We will keep our API for more, I don't know, a few versions, probably 2 years or more. So everyone have time to change it from the API. And well, and the WordPress API is the possibility really don't have any limits.
Sure.
We can do anything there, and right now we focus on like settings. Almost in the future versions, we'll be able to any settings that is available on WooCommerce will be available in the API too. And reports too, it's another thing will be there really soon.
So, what are you most excited about?
Oh, well, and the whole API now. It's like, it's in the past 2 years, we expanded building this API. Skyverge helped us, and right now it's all the work is like consolidated.
Sure.
There, like this will be our really API now. So yeah, I'm really happy with our what we achieve here.
Love it. David, a question for you, and actually I'm going to extend this to the entire panel, is what is your biggest pain point with WooCommerce Core? Yes, David.
Yes.
Just keeping track of versions. It's very difficult to, like a client often expects for a project to be, they do a build and then it'll last forever, exactly as it is. So the hardest thing is to set expectations against like an ongoing pace of spend, and to know what that pace of spend is going to be in reality. Actually, we find WooCommerce Core, over the last couple of years has been super stable. It's actually more the extensions that tend to change a little bit faster.
Sure.
And that's where a lot of the customization work that we do comes in. And so one of the extensions change significantly, then that can be painful. Sometimes it even happens within a development cycle, right? So you have a pretty big project, like maybe 3 months or more, and you start building against this set ecosystem of plugins, and then you get to the end of the project, you're like, do we release this thing with all these updates pending, or do we update it all and hope we don't have to go back and do another month worth of work to fix it all up? So yeah, it's that's the biggest challenge for us, is not so much from the code, but from the kind of business perspective. How do we manage all of that?
Certainly. Bren, from your perspective.
Yeah, I could probably give two conflicting answers, I think, because on the one hand, it's gotten a lot better in the last probably 18 months or so, but backward compatibility is always something we've had to invest a lot of time in to make sure that subscriptions and our other code is still working with the newest versions. But then on the other hand, because I've talked to Mike Jolie and stuff about this before in the past. It's always this double-edged sword. It's like, oh, I'm so glad to see this being like improved, but it breaks everything that I'd written that worked with it. Because there's other things in there, like download handling could really use like a complete rewrite to sort of just make it awesome. And so could some of the shipping stuff you have at the moment, data about shipping stored in the cart and some stored in the separate shipping object, and you have shipping packages and you have shipping methods, and then you have rates for packages relating to methods, and it's just crazy complicated. And if you were able to step back and say, okay, let's design this from scratch, but by doing that, you then break compatibility. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Becca, any take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Brent here. We spend a lot of time as well with different compatibility releases. So, for example, we choose to support the current version and then like 2 versions back. And so with every major update, I'll invest a lot of time into testing plugins with, like, let's say WooCommerce 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, making sure that the plugin is functional as it's intended to be in every single one. But again, it is a double-edged sword, right? It's really important that you're getting updates and you're improving the software, and then it can improve quickly and iterate quickly. And so while it's a pain point, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Software is going to need updates. It's going to need to be maintained. And a great example is Claudio did a lot of work in WooCommerce 2.6 in creating a tabbed account area for customers, which was something that I had brought up to him a while back, I think. Yeah. It's a great way for your customers to be able to see more information, let's say, subscriptions in a dedicated tab, instead of having to scroll through that one-page account system, forever and ever and ever. And so I don't necessarily, while that's a pain point for developers, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. That we can make sure that we're compatible, and it takes time, but it's worth it to be able to get those kind of improvements.
Awesome. Claudio, you would have a perspective from the core side. What would be your take on that?
Well, about updates, we really need to improve some stuff. I used to say I'm in the team to make our stop killing our children. I see all of the projects, plugins like our children, and we need to stop killing them. And yeah, that's kind of my main role in some aspects. Like every time we do something new, I go there, make some tests and see, oh, maybe this is not a really good idea, can broke someone, or sometimes I see, this is make some changes on subscription. I ping branch, hey, what you think about this?
Sure.
Yeah, but it's hit really hard every time trying to don't break anything, because we are moving really fast. People expect us to be fast too. We need a lot of new features, improvements, and keep the compatibility. It's hard, really hard, but we're getting there.
Hey.
On that point,
moving forward for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just want to add, I think, two things, I guess. One, it's actually really cool seeing, like on that point of backward compatibility, the difference now to what it was like 3 years ago having you there, Claudio. Because you can actually see the dynamic between Mike, who's like, we need to make this perfect, and you who's like, we need to not kill our children.
Oh yeah.
and you could really see it making a difference. But also, I think, it's changing more and more, but WooCommerce is still 4.5 or so years old, Some of these things, well, all of these things are going to be a lot easier to change now, and they're a lot easier to change a year ago and 2 years ago than they're going to be in another year or another 2 years. So while it's still possible to move fast, it's going to get harder and harder and harder, particularly with like extremely important things like the database storage of orders and things like that we talked about yesterday. And so in some cases, it's like it's a good time to wear that pain, and then like it'll pay dividends massively in the future.
Certainly.
Yeah.
WooCommerce in the enterprise. I think that's an interesting take as it continues to grow. I mean, 37% is the number that we've been talking about the last couple of days. It's pretty awesome. But what does it take to appeal to mega brands, right? I think that there's a lot to be said on the WordPress side for that still, but also with WooCommerce. What does it take to appeal to those mega stores? What still needs to be done?
That's a great question. So WordPress is already attractive to mega brands. You have huge content sites, brands on WordPress.com VIP. You have a lot of very large brands already using WordPress, already at least open to WordPress,
Sure.
and the stability of that. And for e-commerce, I think it's harder because a lot of these mega brands that are selling, they were first to the game. They were first to the e-commerce game. They have established stores. They're using software that they've been using for a long time. And they don't often migrate. Migrations are really hard. And changing your data structure from something that exists now and works, and you've invested maybe up to millions of dollars in development time into, is difficult. It's like, you look at like the financial sector, and banks using software that's like 20 years out of date, right? Because it's expensive to switch. So I think what's more likely, and this is something I'm kind of borrowing from Brent, is that more likely you'll see stores that are like smaller or maybe even larger brands that grow with WooCommerce. And over time, Patrick Garman talked about this a lot yesterday and had a great talk on how we can make that easier so that it will grow with those brands. So I think that it's unlikely that you'd see mega brands necessarily switching because there are huge costs involved in that. They would need to have a huge payoff for it. I think that the better goal would be to make sure that WooCommerce can grow with those stores that may turn into the next mega brands. Sorry, I stole that from you, Brent.
I hope we see it. You go, David? You deal with clients?
We see interest from very big brands in WooCommerce as well. The purchasing cycle time for enterprise is kind of the age of WooCommerce anyway. So, it takes them a while to change. As you said, they've got lots of investments, complex software ecosystems. I think for anyone that's going to the enterprise market, you have to play to the strength of WordPress and WooCommerce, which is about agility, the ability to move fast, low cost, flexibility, experimentation, adopting some of the kind of, the modern future of WooCommerce tactics, strategy really. So building communities, integrating commerce with content strategy, membership, subscription, value adds beyond just selling a product. And that's where WordPress has always kind of had an angle on these much bigger CMS systems. And once there's a beachhead, then we tend to see WordPress infiltrate in through the wider organization. I think we're seeing the same thing with WooCommerce. What's going to be key is the API. That's really the route in, because suddenly it doesn't matter that it's not all on a Microsoft.NET stack, because we can just send data back to Microsoft Dynamics or pull data from a campaign management site. So yeah, play to WooCommerce strengths, but it's definitely going to cause ripples.
Yes, we need it on every site. That'd be good, right?
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Development with WooCommerce and developing with WooCommerce, theming, page builders, and really the best practices around it. When we're talking about customizing themes, so let's step into the theme world for a second. To use with WooCommerce, is it better to use templates, or is it better to head and just go straight into using the native hooks that are available? David, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks. Whenever I see somebody overriding a WooCommerce core template, it makes me sad. Like we have a standing rule that you better be able to defend your reasoning if I see you
Thank
doing
you.
it. But then that's the reason for that is because the templates change more quickly than the hooks and the filters, right? So you guys do a great job of protecting hooks and filters and functions, but it's harder to do that with themes. And so it breaks more if you override templates. Having said that, one of the things everyone loves about WordPress and WooCommerce is that you can start from zero and scale up to being like a super world expert. And sometimes overriding templates is the easiest, quickest, or sometimes the only economic way of doing it when you don't have that experience. And it teaches you how to do that. If you later can come back and do it with hooks and filters instead and improve. Everyone looks at the work they did 2 months ago and goes, oh. And that's it. But I would say, like, if you're starting out, it's worth putting a bit of time and energy into using hooks and filters. Templates are painful.
Brent, what's your take?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if the WooCommerce templates change, we've seen that, and hopefully you can make most of the modifications you want to make with CSS alone. And then if you can't, if you need to add things, hooks and filters will definitely be a safer way for future compatibility to do it. Yeah, I would
Hook it
100%
up.
agree. Yeah, learn hooks and filters. Get you a long way.
Page builders, what's your take on page builders?
I'll let you handle that first.
Beaver Builder's cool. I'll throw a plug in for them. I think page builders, I mean, they're something people want. So regardless from a developer perspective, if you have issues of how they store the HTML in like a serialized array or isn't an options table or some technical issue, people want to be able to make their site look the way they want it. So it's going to be a balancing act of trying to find and I guess recommend the best ones that you find, because people are always going to want them, people are always going to build them, regardless of whether you think like you shouldn't be using them, you should be doing it in pure HTML. And you know, it's in some ways it's almost like the old developer editor wars where people would be like you should only use Vim versus like a modern fandangled IDE or something. It's like you shouldn't use a page builder, you should only like be writing pure templates or hooks and filters and stuff like that.
Anybody else have fun?
Claudia, you look-
No one wants to
look like
touch
you got
that.
something.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of page builders. Not at all. Like almost the cases I saw, it's really easy for just users. If you're not a developer, of course, but I saw a lot of a bunch of data or things that is there in your website. You never be using the full page builder. So I think it's too many code to do a little things. I don't know, in some cases it's more easy, hire some developer to fix or do this kind of stuff for you. Maybe it can be a little less stressful. You can expend less money too, but yeah, that's my opinion as a developer about page builders.
It's awesome. The version control, let's talk about version control and your guys' recommendations in terms of how it should be used. Should users be controlling just their theme? I mean, what should they be looking at? The whole WP content folder, the whole WordPress structure? What is it they should be committing?
I think David's probably
David?
really
David,
well
yeah.
equipped to answer that.
Client sites.
I'll wade right in. Like the question before, I think it comes down to balancing out requirements. So sometimes we'll do the hosting and maintenance for a client, and they'll have their own developers doing some tweaks. So in that case, we want to have everything in version control, where we're pretty confident that it's just us working on it. There's sometimes an argument just to have the theme. We're actually moving more to having the whole of themes and plugins in version control, just because we've work quite hard at a workflow around updates and maintenance, and it makes more sense for us to do that, to have everything in Git. WordPress, not so much. We use WP Engine for our hosting, and so if they want to push out a core update, that would get pretty complicated. We don't want uploads in there because we don't want to spend an hour waiting for Git to download if we're onboarding a new developer to a project. But it definitely comes down to a balance of requirements.
There are some cool things out there like WP Skeleton, and I think Human Made have something as well where you can have this sort of master WordPress repository, and then you in Git, and then you have your WP content folder as sub-modules or sub-trees, and so you can keep separate versions of your plugins. And I think those kind of things could be really cool. Version control, in addition to sort of just having a record of all the changes, can give you some really powerful tools like Git bisect and reflog that you might want to use if something changes on the site and they're not your changes. For example, if you're using third-party extensions and you have access to that repository and you can have that full history as well as your own full history, then you can use some of those tools to see why this broke and then send that on to the developer and get it fixed as soon as possible.
Awesome. As we close out the session, I'd like to hear from each one of you. Becca, starting with you, what are you looking forward to most in terms of the future of WooCommerce development?
I think Claudio and David are pretty spot on that the REST API opens up a lot of possibilities. And storing everything in WordPress isn't always necessary or perhaps the best approach for what you're trying to do. For example, if you have like a lot of analytics data, while you could do a lot of that stuff and store it yourself, it's sometimes easier to offload some of that stuff off your site into a hosted service. And having that ability to communicate really effectively with your site and anything external, like Bryce's examples yesterday were phenomenal, right? You can take your site and communicate with a drone helicopter. Like, how amazing is that?
Awesome.
Right? And so being able to have that two-way communication between your site and any external services that you have, like, for example, shipping fulfillment services, being able to offload your tax calculations, right? Being able to maybe take orders from other sales channels and pipe that order data into WooCommerce to keep track of those sales in one centralized place, to then get that order data back out and be able to run analyses on that data with an external service. That data portability between WooCommerce and other platforms, I think, is going to really open up a lot of possibilities for bigger stores to be able to move fast with improving their businesses. So REST API development's exciting, for sure.
I can dig it. Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think all developers are excited about what we can do with the REST API. I'm not sure. Well, I asked Claudio yesterday, and it's not even an idea yet. We'll see if it ever does come. But you could even start putting the cart through the REST API, so you can have a cart object that you can actually access through a REST API, adding items and things like that, and then that keeps WooCommerce as like your central sort of e-commerce server that pushes out to whatever you want to do with it. But I think there's also, I mean, I'm really interested to see what happens once WooCommerce gets to sort of 50% of all e-commerce stores and maybe 60, 70, 75%, who knows where it'll go, because that opens up, particularly if there's a REST API on 75% of e-commerce stores in the world, that probably opens up new possibilities for things we can see that to build that we've never seen before. And they might be things like perhaps a decentralized marketplace where you have, say, 200,000 stores all running their own thing, but they all connect through the REST API to this one central marketplace, which is an Amazon competitor, because all of a sudden it has 200,000 merchants around the world. Some crazy things like that probably not in the near future, but I think maybe 5 years, 10 years out, we might see something really, really interesting around that.
Awesome.
I'm going to choose something else rather than just saying REST API. Although my first answer was drone delivered pizza. Yeah. For me, it's going to be. It already is, and I'm excited to watch the continuation of these tools, which let us spend less time fixing stuff and more time moving things forward. So, like testing front-end, back-end unit testing, continuous integration, taking a lot of so we're talking about taking WordPress to enterprise. There's also a lot of what I see as kind of bigger software project stuff coming back down through to WordPress, so it's really accessible. So letting this incredibly talented pool of developers worldwide work on things that are pushing WordPress forwards rather than looking backwards, trying to like untangle tech debt and fix bugs. That's really exciting because the more time we spend looking forward and making progress, the better it is for our clients and for ourselves.
That's very good. Claudio?
Well, of course, I'm really excited about the REST API, but yeah, for me, it's keeping great for the users, and right now the focus is make it fast and to make, like Patrick said, people have some issues on large scales, and that's, or for me, it's what we more need now. And yeah, that's it. Speed.
I think that it's well, one, I appreciate you being on the panel today, and I think that it'd be awesome to get more amazing developers into the community. Any advice for folks looking to get into development, WooCommerce development? What's the takeaway that they should bring?
Watching the core repository and what goes on there is great, but the best way I've found and how I kind of got into starting to develop things is trying to solve problems people have with plugins, because what I found is that the first time I had ever tried to solve a problem for someone to build a plugin for it, you kind of get into a labyrinth of core code where it's like Inception and you go like 4 levels deep, right? It's like, okay, well, this function is leading into this template and this template has this hook and now I have to follow it down through here to this function. And so I learned a lot by following through that process of trying to solve a problem. And when you have that really concrete application and you have a clear picture of what you want it to change and what you want it to do, that really helps you get familiar with the core code base and how things are structured and what's available for you to make merchants' lives easier. And so getting into plugin development or likewise theme development and trying to solve problems gives you the motivation and means to kind of bend core to what you're trying to do.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I think also contributing. So if you contribute to WooCommerce or you find other plugins that are available openly on GitHub, submitting pull requests can be a really great way to learn because you don't have to start with that whole problem and the whole thing yourself. You can actually build on something that's already there, and it's a much gentler sort of introduction to do that. And if you submit a pull request, hopefully if you've got like nice core developers like Claudio and Mike and extremely talented core developers like them, you'll also get feedback on the code you've submitted, and there might be something there like you haven't made your strings available for translation, or you haven't escaped the data you're pushing out here, or things that will, it only takes an experienced developer a few comments to let you know that that's best practice, and instantly you've just leveled up as a developer. So getting any kind of code review on your code is brilliant for improving, and contributing to public repositories is a great way to get that.
I'm going to go for a less sort of developer-y answer and just a general message of like, go for it. There are so many ways to make a great living with WooCommerce, even if you don't want to write code. So many people that just need help writing great content, marketing it effectively, doing conversion optimization. There's a ton of stuff, and it's a great career. WordPress and WooCommerce, you'll meet some of the smartest people that you'll meet. You'll have one of the most flexible careers that you could have. You can work on a beach, you can work in the city. It's just go for it.
Well, as Becca said, trying to fix the things first for yourself. To be honest, I am working in WooTeams and WooCommerce because I just started building some stuff for myself. I built a few plugins and I start to solve some things that I can improve in WooCommerce or fix. And 1 year later, I am in the top 5 core committers, and they hired me. So if you want a job, maybe you can go there, submit some pull requests, we can hire you. And yeah, for sure, it's a great start.
I agree with everything you just said, all of you. Amazing. In fact, I love WordPress so much I went and got it tattooed years ago. So there's that. I'm 100%.
When's the WooCommerce tattoo coming?
Yeah, well, we got to talk about that.
After tonight?
Well, it's going to be a good after party, I'll tell you that. Thank you so much for your time today on the panel. You guys are amazing, doing amazing stuff. Continue moving forward. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.